As pianists go through the process of learning the piano, there are often a lot of pieces that most pianists want to learn, and therefore some pieces of music become way overplayed. So in today's video, I'm going to find out and see if I agree with the 10 most overplayed songs according to Lord Vinheteiro. I apologise if I've butchered his name. Let's get into it. I mean, you could have nightmares about how he's staring into the camera. I think the first movement of Moonlight Sonata probably is overplayed, but with good reason. It's one of those pieces that isn't too technically challenging for someone to learn at kind of an intermediate level, but it does require a lot of interpretation, and it's very good for learning certain techniques and things about the piano. For example, the piece has a time signature that is cut time, which means 2-2, and this means there are 2 half notes, or minims per bar, and therefore you've got to feel the pulse twice per bar. It's also really good for training balance into your hand, because you've got to get the melody to sing out at the top half of your right hand. So it's a great piece for building control into your hands. The right hand is also mostly outlining chord shapes, so it's a really good piece for understanding chords and how they relate to the key that the piece is in, so C sharp minor. So yeah, I definitely think this piece is overplayed. If you are a pianist, there's probably very little chance that you haven't played this piece, but I think that's for a pretty good reason. I can't hear this song without thinking of Terry Crews sat in a car. And I need you, and I miss you. I definitely nailed that. This is actually a song that I also learned in my early piano playing. I actually think it's a very underrated song. And while, yes, I do think this is an overplayed song, in the stack of songs that most people tend to learn, this is probably quite high up there. But I do think it teaches you quite a lot about music. For example, it uses 3 chords, essentially, which are E major, F sharp major, B major, but with a D sharp in the bass, and then back to E major. And it obviously has that high piano motif kind of thing, which for a beginner, or at least the time when I tried to learn this piece, was really quite difficult to learn and play, especially playing it evenly, because your hand tends to want to go, particularly if you're trying to force it and you get tension in your hand. But it is such a great piece, it's making me want to play it again. Yeah, this piece is another classic, and it's one of those pieces that you always find in compilation books, or books that usually come with your piano. And if you have a digital piano, it's often one of the pieces that's like pre-recorded into your piano. It's an interesting piece because it's obviously ragtime, so it's a slightly different style, and there are some difficult things in there. Like jumping around with these chords in the left hand can be quite difficult if you are also jumping around in your right hand. But I don't know whether I would classify this as an overplayed piece of music. It's just one that you hear a lot because it's pre-recorded into pianos, or it's the most famous ragtime piece. But I don't know how many pianists actually learn it. I've personally never spent any time learning this piece. I suppose the good thing about this piece is it's in C major, so it's not too difficult to understand, but it does have a lot of extra accidentals thrown in there, like I definitely agree with this one. I think Für Elise is an overplayed piece. It's in the key of A minor, and most of the parts of the piece that people tend to learn is based around two chords, which is A minor and E major. And it's funny because to me, that opening part of the piece is the least interesting part, because in the middle section of this piece, it moves to F major rather than A minor. The chords themselves that are being used, so F major, B flat major, C7, F major, they're all pretty standard chords in themselves within the key of F major, but it's also interesting how it pivots back to A minor by using a scale pattern that's in C major that kind of merges back into that main theme. I mean, the opening for this piece is definitely interesting, but because it's one of those parts of the piece that you hear all the time, it's sort of less interesting now. I'm sorry, Beethoven. I actually did a video 2 years ago making the Knuckles song into a full piece of music, because most people play that idea. But that's pretty much all there is to that song. But yeah, I attempted to make that 10 times better. So go and check out that video and see if you think I did a good job. I suppose the interesting thing about this piece is because you're only using the black notes, you're essentially playing something called a pentatonic scale. And the interesting thing about a pentatonic scale is, one, it's used for a lot of like blues, jazz, guitar solos. It's also used a lot in like Japanese, Asian style music. But you can essentially play any black notes on the piano and it not sound like it clashes too much, because you can kind of make chords out of all of the notes. It's an overplayed song, but it's more of a party trick that people who can't play the piano tend to play on the piano. There is no actual practical reason to use your knuckles on the piano rather than your fingers. It just seems a bit of a waste of time. But it's definitely one of those pieces where a friend will come round who doesn't play the piano and will play the knuckles song on your piano. Yeah, so once again, I do think this is an overplayed piece, but it wasn't actually originally written for the piano. It was written for, I think, like a string quartet, or maybe a string trio, or something like that. It's just been adapted for piano, guitar, lots of instruments. I don't think this is a piece that people often play though, and it's not a piece that people choose to play that often. Or at least I don't think, but it's one of those pieces that you hear a lot because it's used quite a lot for weddings and things like that. There's something quite regal and prim and proper about the piece, which means people like to use it in weddings to give off a more sophisticated vibe. That is until Maroon 5 ruined it by using it in the song Memories. But it's definitely a great piece, and that chord pattern has been used in so many things over the years just because of how it was used in that piece of music, which is D, A, B minor, F sharp minor, G, D, G, and A. And I think it's probably the most famous canon that exists, which is where you essentially have one melody, but it's started by different instruments, kind of one after the other, so it overlaps on itself. It's a very clever piece of writing. He was definitely trying not to laugh in the middle of that when he changed camera angle. I must have said this about 6 times now, but I just don't like this piece. And here we are again with it showing up in a video. The reason that I don't like it is because I think it is overplayed, and it's been requested for me to teach it probably that many times, that it now just brings me out in cold sweats. But I also think it's got quite a repetitive chord sequence, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So once you've heard the first 10 seconds of the piece of music, then you've kind of heard most of it. And on top of that, if you hear the piece lots of times, you're hearing that same motif over and over again. I can definitely see why people learn it, and I don't think there's anything really wrong with the piece of music. I think it's a good piece of music, but I've just heard it too many times. It's interesting that an impossible piece to play on the piano has made it into the most overplayed pieces on the piano. Yeah, so I have a very on and off relationship with Sheet Music Boss, who are obviously the composers of Rushy, but I have done several videos reacting to Rushy, Rushy 2, Rushy 3, and I even made it into the introduction for Rushy 3. And I did a YouTube short playing a cover of Rush E2. Once again, it's a piece that I think is heard quite a lot because of all of the video memes, especially if you are part of internet and YouTube culture in any way. But I think for the vast majority of players or people learning the piano, they've probably never heard of the piece, never mind overplayed it. So I think it's definitely overplayed for a subcategory of pianists, but not all pianists. It's a cool piece though, and it's actually in the key of A minor rather than E. It just uses a lot of E's in the piece. But it's actually a really good technique to be able to learn to play the same key with multiple fingers, because it does happen in quite a lot of pieces. So this is an interesting one because Bach's Prelude in C major is probably an overplayed piece, but once again, like the Moonlight Sonata, I think that is with very good reason, because I think it's a great piece for learning, and there are so many ways of interpreting the piece that it never really gets boring. But adding Still Dre onto the end of classical pieces as like a meme, I think that definitely is overplayed, and once again I think it's more by players that aren't really serious pianists or people trying to learn. A little bit like the Knuckles song, it's one of those pieces where if you don't play the piano, it might be the one piece that you know how to play on the piano. It's a very well written piano hook because obviously it's very memorable, but yeah, I definitely think it's overplayed. So interestingly, Heart and Soul, yes, definitely overplayed on the piano. And it's another one that some people can play who don't really learn the piano or aren't trying to get good at the piano. It's just a piece that they are able to play. So yes, definitely overplayed. However, I would definitely recommend going and listening to the original song because the original song is so quaint. I fell in love with you, heart and soul. And honestly, while it's probably now quite boring to listen to on the piano, listening to the original song is such a different experience. And this piece is a 4-chord piece, and it's the 4 chords that are used in all the pop songs, but it's kind of like the origin story of the 4 chords. I'll leave a link in the description to the original song so you can go and check it out. If you've never heard it before, then it might change your perspective on the piano version of the song. But that was very interesting. I think there are loads of overplayed songs and pieces on the piano. So if you think there are any particularly overplayed songs, let me know in the description. And if you want to see my reaction to my subscribers playing the piano, then head on through, and I will see you there.